This is Florida Matters. I'm Carson Cooper. My guest is Florida Commissioner of Agriculture Adam Putnam. You recently hosted a Florida Energy Summit in Orlando. What's the takeaway from that summit?
Well, the takeaway from that is that energy policy is the lifeblood of our economy. I mean, if you want to attract manufacturing jobs, energy's a major input into those types of jobs. We're a peninsula. We have to produce the electricity that we need to support our economy. And so I rolled out my proposals for energy policy for this year, which include cutting the sales tax that businesses pay on the purchase of electricity in half, which will make us more competitive with our southeastern states, and applying the remaining half to public education capital outlay, which is the building fund to get our kids out of portables, to help campuses like USF continue to attract world-class researchers with lab improvements, the dorms that they need, the classroom space that has the technological capacity that students today require. The PICO fund, which funds education buildings, is essentially broke. And so having that dedicated revenue stream is an investment in our future and in our workforce development, and reducing that sales tax paid on that electricity keeps us more competitive. The second piece of that puzzle was to give businesses the same opportunities that homeowners have to invest in renewable energy, things like solar panels on their rooftops. And the third piece was a sales tax holiday on the purchase of Energy Star appliances that save water consumption and save on electricity consumption. This is a proven method of helping people upgrade things in their home that have a social benefit by using collectively a lot less water and a lot less electricity.
Why a holiday? Why not just make it a permanent reduction?
Well, because by having a defined beginning and end date, you can measure its progress, and you can create the demand to make those incentives in a particular period of time. So perhaps you do it, around the time that refund checks go out from the IRS. Other states have done that. At the end of the day, it's still an important sales tax collections or how we power the state's economy.
I always wonder about these sales tax holidays, and even like cash for clunkers. It just delays, it affects behavior. It just delays what you're going to buy eventually anyway. So there's really no net increase or
well,
benefit.
Except that when you're talking about many of the things that we're talking about, they're not necessarily fun purchases to make. I mean, we're not talking about, people will probably delay upgrading their hot water heater as long as possible. That's not a fun purchase to make. Nobody says, boy, I'm really looking forward to upgrading my hot water heater. But if they knew that if they knew that they'd been in their house or they'd had that water heater for a period of time where it is nearing the end of its life, but they now have an incentive not to wait till it absolutely dies to get a much more energy and water efficient hot water heater, then you have created not only the social benefit of using less water and less electricity, but you've created that rationale for that consumer to go ahead and make that purchase now rather than waiting until it dies on them completely.
Now, you say you generally favor the effort to advance solar power in Florida. To what degree?
Well, renewable energy is something that has potential in our state. Certainly not only as the Sunshine State, but also a state that has a year-round growing season, and as those technologies improve, and that's really the key. With the shale gas revolution and the movement of electricity generation in Florida towards natural gas, and even a migration of transportation fuels toward compressed natural gas and liquefied natural gas, the benefits that people are realizing as a result of those low costs of that domestically produced fuel are tremendous. As the technology continues to get better, and I like to say that solar panels are like flat screen TVs, they continue to get cheaper and they continue to get better and more efficient. They have a role in the portfolio, but they're still not competitive yet in terms of a pricing mechanism.
Couldn't sustain itself without taxpayer subsidies.
That's correct.
Although fossil fuel companies also get subsidies to a much smaller degree, but the energy Information Administration did a cost projection for 2018. Solar, twice as expensive as natural gas. Solar, 80 cents per kilowatt hour versus 10 cents for natural gas. But is there a place for Florida? You think in the Sunshine States, that a state like New Jersey, which notably tops Florida when it comes to solar power production, you think Florida would be a little higher up in the list?
Well, there's a couple things about that. Number one, I don't think you want to trade electricity bills with someone from New Jersey. Okay. Number two, you're absolutely right, and that's why I say we need to continue to have our university system and the research and development oriented towards bringing those solar costs down, because Florida will benefit the most as you reach what they call that parity, that solar parity, where the price of that fossil fuel generated kilowatt is equal to the renewable fuel kilowatt. And Florida, but we are not there yet. And so that is a key part of that. However, the other thing to keep in mind, even as we migrate towards 60-70% dependency on natural gas for electricity generation in our state, is that you're talking about a fuel source that is just in time delivery, and currently 90% of that fuel is being delivered into our state through 2 pipelines. And so you're at somewhat of a risk of supply disruption if anything ever happened on one of those 2 pipelines, both of which originate essentially in Hurricane Alley. So the state's moving forward with a 3rd pipeline that will diversify within that category, that'll bring an extra 1 billion cubic feet of gas per day. But you will see greater demand on natural gas, and that's going to have an effect on price. And we, the natural gas revolution is an extraordinary thing for North America, but for Florida, because we don't produce it, we don't really have much storage capacity, we don't have much liquefaction capacity. It's just something to be aware of, that I believe diversity in our fuel portfolio is an important public policy option. We don't put the whole state pension fund in one stock just because it's hot. We deliberately have diversity to protect the people whose retirements are depending on that pension fund. The energy supply portfolio is somewhat similar to that.
Hydraulic fracking is big news in places like Pennsylvania and Ohio. I don't really think of Florida as a fracking state, but it did come up recently in the Panhandle. What's your thoughts on fracking?
Well, just sort of a quick history lesson about energy production in Florida. There's 2 areas of Florida that currently produce oil. Southwest Florida, there's an area called the Sunnyland area around Felda in eastern Collier County. And there's an area up against the Alabama line near Jay, the old Jay oil field. And those 2 areas have been producing since World War II. We're certainly in no danger of replacing West Texas in terms of being a major energy supplier. But those are traditional methods of drilling for oil. There is some renewed interest in expanding those finds using new technology, but not fracking technology. The legislature, in anticipation of perhaps some new interest in Florida, has moved forward to adopt standards for fracking in Florida. But there really doesn't appear to be much interest, and there doesn't appear to be much geologic supply of shale that would be unlocked in Florida through fracking. So I think this is just, the fracking issue was the legislature being prudent, but there's just not that much interest in fracking in Florida.
Now, back during your 2010 campaign against Democrat Scott Maddox, you declared that you would not support increased drilling in the Gulf. Now, I've got to remember, this is back when oil was gushing out of Deepwater Horizon. Now, you have supported it in the past. Is that still your stance?
There is no need to have offshore drilling in Florida. There's not the necessary demand for it, given the shale gas revolution and how cheap natural gas is. The bulk of reserves that are known that are offshore in the nearshore area of the Eastern Gulf are gas reserves, not oil reserves. Remember, the BP oil spill was way offshore, very deep water, oil off of Louisiana. The Destin Dome and the areas off of Florida that have been surveyed in the past tend to be natural gas reserves. Either way, it doesn't make economic sense to tap into those, given the shale gas revolution in the Dakotas, in East Texas and Louisiana, in the Pennsylvania areas. And from an economic viewpoint of Floridians, nearshore drilling doesn't make a whole lot of sense. In the two areas of Florida onshore where they've been producing oil for the last 60 or 70 years, I think you are going to continue to see expanded interest in those areas on the oil side more so than the gas side.